and say the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Just by way of notification, Lauren Rabin is participating on the call via conference call, so there are 6 of us. I understand Dr. Francis is on our way, and maybe Ms. O'Neill as well. We have before us a meeting agenda. Of course, this being a special meeting, there's only one topic. We can't necessarily change any of the topics that are on the agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the meeting agenda as proposed? Ms. Dayton, do I have a second? Yes, a question.
I just have a question regarding the length of the public comment period. Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Chair, I'd ask how many speakers do we have signed up?
We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have probably 15 in support, and then 2 who do not support the motion as listed in our agenda.
So with 17 speakers at approximately 3 minutes each, I would suggest that's slightly over 30 minutes that we had allocated for this meeting, but I would like to hear all the public comment.
Okay.
And I would respectfully request that if there are any students who wish to speak, that they be allowed to go first so they can be excused.
Currently under our rules, regardless of what was posted under our rules, we take all public comment unless someone, we have an option to take public comment for 30 minutes and then consider the motion and then take additional comments. But that needs a motion from someone on the board to do that. It needs a majority to pass.
Peter, I'd like to make a motion to limit comments to 30 minutes, take up our motion, and then if there's any additional comments, do that after the motion.
There's a motion on the table. It hasn't been said, but it's related to the agenda. Yeah, I mean, you're right. Technically, we can take it in order. We can approve the agenda.
Sorry, I should have been speaking. I'm sorry, we're just trying to make sure that we've done this in the proper
yeah, I think what we have,
rules.
but let me just, as point of order here, right? I think what we have is we have a motion to accept the agenda, a motion to approve the agenda, right? Which doesn't have a second yet, right? Ms. Erickson has asked for a point of information.
Correct.
Right, which she now has. And now there is a motion on the table to modify the agenda before it's accepted.
In that form, then that would be correct.
Yes. So there's a motion to modify the agenda. Is there a second to Ms. Rabin's motion? Okay, with that, I think we're going to take all of the public comment. Okay, so we're back to the agenda as proposed. Is there anything else anyone wants to propose modifying in the agenda?
I'll just reiterate my point that if there are students signed up to speak, I think we should give them the courtesy of going first.
Yeah, I completely agree. As a matter of fact, that's the way we're going to conduct it. Normally we take it in order, but we're going to go through the students first so they can get focused if they want to stay. So the agenda is before us. Is there a second? Mr. Bernstein. All those in favor of accepting the agenda as is? That's Lauren?
Nope.
Okay, so that's 5, 1, 0. Okay, so now we're going to proceed. We're going to start with community comments. Out of fairness, we're going to take it in order of people who support and don't support until, so that we can hear both sides. We're going to start with Katie Large. I'm sorry. We're going to start with Peter Carino.
Do you want to call?
Mr. Chair, point of order.
Yes.
If I could please remind the audience that the speaker time is limited to 3 minutes. I will be using a timer, and in fairness, to make sure everyone gets time to speak, I will give you a 30-second warning towards the end of your time, and ask that you respectfully stop speaking when your time is up so everyone can be heard. Thank you.
The other thing I'd like to just add, thank you very much, Ms. Adelbaum. The other thing I'd like to add, I'm sure there are lots of things a lot of people would like to tell the board. We hear from people quite regularly. But since we have this issue before us tonight, if anybody's comments can focus on the issue that's before us tonight as opposed to other issues, that would always be helpful. Thank you. Mr. Carino.
Peter Carino, lifetime resident of Greenwich. My kids, adult children, went through the school system here. My volunteer work is I'm the vice president of the GYFL, and I'm a volunteer classroom instructor for the junior achievement. Yes, I mean, how we got here doesn't matter. You know, it has to be fixed. The things that I am most concerned with, and not necessarily in this order, but I think any reasonable person would have to agree. One is the safety issue. I mean, we are going to have a kid out there, whether it be a Greenwich student or somebody else, in a sanctioned event, practice, a game, they're going to get hurt. Hopefully it's not catastrophic, but it will be followed up by a lawsuit. And we will have a very hard time defending ourselves. Why we let people do this in the dark, after sunset. I mean, it's a dangerous situation. It's got to end like immediately. Something has to be done just for self-preservation. That horrifies me as a Greenwich resident. And I don't see how anybody could, disagree with that. The other thing is, the state of Connecticut is in not good shape financially. The bright spots are Fairfield County. And when people come to move to Connecticut, that live in New York or work in New York, they're looking at Greenwich, New Canaan, Darien, blah, blah, blah. They come here, there's a lot of things they consider, for sure. We have great academics, facilities, and regardless of what you think about academics, versus sports and athletics, the facilities we have and this problem we have is a blemish, regardless of how big or small you think it is. And that's real important when people come here. We're competing for that. This town and Fairfield County, pays a huge sum to run the state of Connecticut, and we're competing with those. So our facilities, they have to at least be up to par, and they're subpar. And this whole thing, to other people, it's almost laughable. I know people who give tours to newcomers at Greenwich High, and that's what they talk about. After they go to see the classroom and the facilities and what's offered, they want to see the athletic facilities. There's a reason there's so many varsity programs in the high school these days. There's something for everyone. There really is. And I think it's a very important part of life, which leads me up to my last point here. We want our kids to be academically challenged and develop a physical lifestyle that they'll carry through life. Be active, not sedate. We lessen the sports programs, the less kids involved. The last thing we need is more, kids who are sitting around on their phone instead of running around outside. Thank you.
Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, fellow members. I rise this evening to speak in opposition to going forward with the legality or the legal issue that you've put forward. And I know I'm getting a lot of stares from a lot of people in the room because I've been at this for a long time, and as everybody knows, I strongly support all of the athletic programs at the high school. I was part of the original program that got the lights and the turf at the stadium some 18 years ago that we started that program. And here's my reasoning to speak against this vote that you want to take this evening. Number one, from a community standpoint, I believe that we are a community and that we need to work on some of these issues together as a community, and that we have some neighbors that are in the area of the high school that have some concerns. and have not been able to present those concerns in the proper forums. And we know these neighbors, I've coached some of their children, they've been part of what we're all about, we want to respect them. We need to do this as a community, we only have one high school. I listened to them at last night's meeting, what their concerns were, and some of them are legitimate. And they really should have the proper forums to do that, and so that we can understand and develop a plan that can work. At the meeting last night, you had talked about some of the proper resolutions that could be afforded the high school athletes if we were able to potentially light one other practice field and add some additional time at Cardinal Stadium. I believe from a procedural standpoint, what needs to be done from here is that the Board of Ed needs to go and file basically 2 MIs, municipal improvements. First being for Cardinal Stadium, outlining what it is the Board of Ed really foresees the requirements are, so that not only the athletic community, but the neighbors themselves can understand what's going to happen at the stadium, how many additional practices may be needed, how many additional games may be needed to resolve the deficiencies that were shown in the presentation last night by the experts that you had hired. Secondly, another MI should be filed immediately for Field 7. It seemed last night in that presentation that Field 7 could be an answer, and the combination of both of those fields would just about resolve most of the issues that are currently being had by the deficiency in the practice times given daylight savings and the later start times. By going through the MI process, the municipal improvement process in town, that process was created for these very situations. And in fact, both stipulations, the 2003 agreement with Mr. Efros and the 2005 approval of the of the turfing of the practice fields, both stipulate that, number one, if any changes were to be made to any of the program at the Cardinal Stadium, that they would return to the RTM to get those approvals verified. The 2005 agreement also states that if any changes or if lights were to be considered at Field 6 and 7, and this is post-EFROS agreement, that the board would return back to the proper planning officials and the process in order to do that. In my mind, your decision to try or vote tonight to go strictly out to legality or out to the legal road is premature. We don't know what you're going there with. The neighbors don't know. We as the athletic community don't know.
Time.
We'd like to know what that is and for that plan to be put in place so we can move.
Katie Large.
As a student athlete at Greenwich High School, the new start time has been torturous. I'm dealing with the rigor of AP and honors classes while also handling soccer practices and games being pushed back an hour later. As a result, I get to sleep at around midnight, only to wake up at 6:30 a.m. to do it all over again. This is the same amount of sleep I was getting before the start time change, which according to Nationwide Children's is not enough. At least 9.5 hours of sleep is needed to keep a teen in optimum health. According to Emily Munson of Greenwich Time, 76% of the student body are athletes at GHS, meaning that most students are going through the same struggles as I am. And now that there's an issue with the lights, a lot of student athletes have this problem a lot worse because they have to go to other fields to practice, which means they're coming home later. Although studies from the National Sleep Foundation reveal that teens naturally go to bed later, there is nothing natural about rushing to get homework done at night to get a decent amount of sleep. Munson also mentions a student that said the change has helped her become happier and more productive throughout the day. However, this isn't the way that the majority of the students feel. In fact, most students did not support the move to 8:30 a.m. In a survey conducted by GHS, nearly 50% of the student body supported the recharge option, to have one day out of the week where school starts at 9 a.m. Only 12% of the student body preferred the change that we have today. In the same survey, students were asked to comment about the school start time. Most students said that the reason they weren't getting sleep was because of the amount of homework given after school combined with their after-school activities, not the time that they were waking up. There is a very clear disconnect with what the root problem is in student stress and lack of sleep is. It is not the time we wake up that causes lack of sleep. It is the time we go to bed caused by homework. Because the start time was pushed back, this issue is escalated. The question that should be asked is about the homework load students receive, not about the time that we wake up. The Finnish education system, one of the best in the world, focuses on engaging students rather than bombarding them with work. According to an article from The Atlantic, Finland's success is especially intriguing because Finnish schools assign less homework and engage children in more creative play. Clearly, the minimal pressure put on Finnish children is helping their education in the long run. Schools in America need to understand relieving stress on students rather than pushing them too far is going to help them achieve more, academically, socially, and emotionally. The Board of Education must enforce a homework limit in order to ensure optimal health for students.
30 seconds.
Changing the school start time solves one root to the problem, yet only ended up creating more in its wake. Thank you.
Two things. I'm not sure who are the students here, because we're going to try to go through the students first. I can see one is Emily Philippides, but I don't know who else is. The second thing I wanted to just reiterate is, Emily, come on up. The second thing I just want to reiterate, we're very interested in comment, but we're really interested in comments as it relates to lights, not as necessarily a general treatise on other topics. So but you say whatever you've got prepared. That's more for the adults.
Okay. Hi, my name is Emily Philippides. I'm a captain for the indoor track team, and I'm here to speak on behalf of this issue on behalf of our team regarding this issue with the lights. I think people often neglect the indoor track team. People have this idea that because it's indoor track, we practice inside, but we are outside every day from December until February, whether it's cold, windy, raining, we're always outside. And now with this school start time change, we can't go out on the roads anymore because it's unsafe running in the dark when there's cars next to us. So we're forced to stay on the track to do all of our practices and all of our workouts. And because we don't have indoor track facilities, we have to stay on the track in order to do all of this stuff. And we cannot possibly fit in everything we want to do from the time that school ends until the time that it gets dark outside. And so if we're going to be practicing outside when it's dark and with no lights on, this is first and foremost like a huge safety concern because the track team itself is like 200 kids. We start off with 200 kids, and when you have 200 kids running around the track, there's no way with no lights on we could not just bump into someone or run into a bench or something could happen like that. And so that's just the main thing. I just don't understand how we could be running outside when we could literally see nothing in front of us. And if we want this indoor track program to continue or any sports program to continue, we have to keep the lights on for practices. And I'm speaking especially for the indoor track team because we practice through December, through January, like every day outside. I can't see how we could just keep the lights off and expect all the kids to be fine. And we've had a really successful program. A lot of girls did very well last year, and if we're not going to be able to practice the way we want to and we should be, we're not going to have that much of a successful season. And it'll be a shame because we don't want our program to deteriorate just because of this single issue that could be resolved if we simply just turn the lights on for an hour or two after it gets dark outside. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay. Michael Smith.
Good evening, Chairman, Board, students, parents, neighbours and interested parties. As you can tell, I'm British, and I've only lived here for a few years, and I've joined this community recently, and I'm very glad to have done so. I think that the level of focus and care and attention that's being ascribed to this issue is important, and it's right that it's done so. I'm here to speak against litigation, but I'm not here to speak against lighting or improvements to the track or the field. I think it's important that students have the time to practice, the time to excel and really demonstrate what a strong town of Greenwich we all live in. I think that's very important, and I think everybody here would agree with me. However, I think there are some things that need to be considered before progressing litigation, which, as we all know, can prove to be very expensive, timely, and distraction from what's most needed here. I think that we should roll it back, sit back and forget the sins and errors of the past, and think about the things that need to be done. I think there should be some studies into procedures and practices around noise, around light, around the environment, as we know that's a very major issue. And indeed, think about rolling back the time. And the student earlier spoke about how many students were actually against that. And it's not always possible to do so, and it can't often be done quickly, but it's something that should potentially be considered. So that's why I'm here to speak, because I think many of the people who are local residents who are going to be impacted by any changes to the environment all would agree that there need to be changes. Some, as we know, disagree, and vehemently so. However, I'll leave and finish with this, that I think we should not proceed with litigation, but proceed with an open forum in which everybody can speak so that we can go forward with the right decision for our town. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who signed up to speak as a student? Or maybe being shy? No, okay, well then we'll move on. Mary Ann Ayuteri. And then I guess it's Dan Salibi. And if I could, just to move us along, I know people feel strongly about the subject, but if you could limit your applause just so we can roll through everybody, that would be really helpful. Because from here, all we have is speakers and support.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Board of Education, for granting my request to have this meeting. My name is Mary Ann Ayuteri. People also know me as Mary Ann Charles. I've lived in Greenwich for 24 years. I have 2 children. My oldest goes to Greenwich High School, and he plays on the football team. And what a year we've had, 8-0. We should all be so proud. Our soccer, our field hockey, our volleyball, our swimming, our water polo, and football teams are making our school and town proud. I've had the distinct and fortunate opportunity through my son's participation in football to meet many parents of high school athletes, and they share my disappointment and frustration in the lack of movement by the Board of Education and the town officials have handled the current light situation. As parents of student athletes, we feel compelled to band together. We are forming an association, Parents for the Greenwich Student Athletes, and I anticipate and know that we will have a large following, not only from football parents, but from all the other sports as well. Our mission, as it should be yours, is to ensure that there's an even playing field for everyone. In my opinion, our board has failed thus far to provide this. Our board has failed to properly anticipate the ramifications of the change in school time and how the change will impact our students' ability to practice and play their chosen sport in a safe and appropriate environment. The board's failure to move quicker towards the goal of opening up what I refer to as the FRO stipulation is most disappointing and screams of bad decision-making and breeds of lack of confidence in our board. Connecticut General Statute, Section 10-220, provides in part, the duties of the Board of Education shall implement the educational activities that will best serve the interests of the school district. Section 1-4A provides in part that each child shall have equal opportunity to receive a suitable program of educational experiences. Billie Jean King has been quoted as saying that sports teaches you character. It teaches you to play by the rules. It teaches you to know what it feels like to win and lose, and it teaches you about life. How important is athletics to our children's education experience, to our community? How suitable are the educational experiences involving our athletic teams when we can't even turn on the lights of the fields as much as we need to? That our children have to play in the dark or not play at all? That our varsity team has to sit on a bus and drive up to New Canaan so they can practice? This will make the time that they can start their homework, eat dinner, delayed even later. We are not nurturing our children as we should be, but we are fracturing them. The board has failed us. As parents, we demand that something be done. I am aware that there's been talks and a general consensus regarding this litigation, and I'm grateful for that. But frankly, it's not fast enough. This should have started a year ago. At the very least, litigation should have begun when the approval went through to change the start of the time. We should have gone for emergency and temporary relief. We demand answers. We demand solutions. We demand that the board immediately authorize the commencement of litigation, ensure that all necessary approvals are done immediately. Let the lawyers do their job. Let the lawyers do their job without interference from the board. Let the superintendent, who has inherited this mess, who has been doing so much the past few weeks to try to work through this problem, let her do her job without interference from this board. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hold on a sec, Dan. Really, we can go through this and we can clap for every single one of these. We're going to be here a long time. I think the important part is to hear from people, and so we can move this along, and then we can get to the discussion about what we're going to do. So I appreciate your help in helping us get to the meat of the subject. Sure. Dan, it'll be Dan, and then it's going to be Victor Cece.
Thank you very much. The meat of the subject is I am in support of Rick Kroll's view on trying to light Field 7 immediately. And look, I don't think anyone really wants to litigate, but if that's our only avenue, let's try and go for Field 7 first. A lot of folks have come in here with medical journals on the benefits of sleep. I contemplated bringing in some journals on the benefits of athletics to a student's GPA, to a whole host of other things, and yes, their sleep as well, but I don't want to inundate you with statistics, and we don't need to debate what is factual. I think what's missing here, though, is there is an undeniable marriage between athletics and academics, and whether it was intentional or not, this situation has divorced that marriage, and that's quite shameful, and this group is here to try and bring that back together. I think one of the things that makes Greenwich High School such a tremendous high school and so colorful is that we have representation across the socioeconomic vertical column at the top, the bottom, and the middle, okay? We have student athletes that come from single working parent families, and when the school bell rings, they don't go home to an empty house. They go to their practice fields. When they get there, they don't play football. They strive, they work hard, they sacrifice. All of those human qualities is what they gain, and that is part of the marriage. Okay? 94% of high school students will not play in college. Last year, John Marinelli put 14 out of 36 kids in college, opportunities that they would not have had. Okay? That is the marriage between athletics and academics. I support Rick Kroll's view, and finally, I would suggest that all of you read the Honorable Alan Page's NFL induction speech into the Hall of Fame, in which he articulates the marriage far better than I. Light Field 7 immediately.
Victor Cece. And then we're going to hear from, I'm sorry, I can't read that name. D. Longhorn? Langen, maybe? I don't know who that is. Is that you? Yes, okay. Victor Cece.
Yes. Good evening. My name is Victor Cece. Many of you know or have heard of my family in this town. We are all very proud to live here in Greenwich, but unfortunately, we have not kept up with the changes that other communities around us have done. I felt compelled to speak this evening, not because of any peer pressure, but more importantly because of my youngest son. I went through this program as well as my brothers, nephews, and my 3 older sons. We are all very proud to be Greenwich Cardinal alumni. For me, this has become a bigger picture than just fall sports in Greenwich. I hope we, as a community, can send a message to all the children, present and future, that live here in Greenwich. The message being that we make a movement in the right direction for all residents to stand up for our rights and abolish the laws that are presently in place to show the future, beyond our children, that we are organized and resilient in our efforts to overcome these restrictions that have been bestowed upon us at an earlier time. We need to keep up with the changes that our neighboring communities have already done. Many people have spoken before me on the pros and cons of fall sports. At this point in time, we as the community should no longer protect or worry about whose feathers get ruffled and what underlying issues there may be. We need to make a stand for our children so in the near future they can all have the amenities that our neighboring towns presently have. I am proud here to stand here this evening and push forward to get the support of all our residents to do what's best for our children and student athletes. My biggest dilemma up to this point is answering the question why. Up until now, we still don't have the answers our children are looking for. We need to push forward and have this resolved like all the other communities that have done this before us. I would like to leave with a closing statement and asking everybody in this room to come together and make this a priority for the future of our children. Thank you very much.
And then we're going to have either Tom and Mary Malucci.
I got it.
No, you're next. You're next. We're ready.
Good evening, everybody. I've been following this football for a little while. I've been following the sports at Greenwich for a little while. What I haven't quite understood is there are 50 to 100 football players in total out of a school of 3,500 kids. Those fields need to be lit for all of the sports. There's 3,500 other kids. They don't play football. This is all about football. It's time to stop. We need to think about many more sports, whether it's baseball, girls athletics, indoor track, outdoor track, water polo, whatever it may be. It can't be we have a shiny new coach, we have a shiny new winning team, and we're all excited about it. I totally agree with that. But to move the start just so we can get extra time to play football seems absurd. And I understand down the road there'll be other sports, whether it be baseball, outdoor track, and all the other stuff in the spring, it's going to have the same problems. But we need to keep a perspective. The kids need more sleep. Practice May was perfectly okay last year for an hour and a half, and now it's not okay for an hour this year. If we put the lights up, they can get their hour and a half back. On that, I leave it. Thank you.
I'd like to say that the football community completely supports that.
Okay, thank you. Tom and/or Mary Malucci. Anybody? Bueller? No, we're good. Thank you. Rob Siska. And then we're going to have, oh boy, I cannot read that. Deb and Mark McBride will be after Rob Siska.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Robert Siska. I'm a lifelong Greenwich resident in the public school at Parkway Western and Greenwich High School. I don't have any children at Greenwich High School. My 2 young boys are at Parkway. But I am a Greenwich real estate attorney, and I practice throughout Westchester County and Fairfield counties. And I will tell you many times when I'm talking to a prospective purchaser or seller about where they're moving and why they're moving there, I've heard that they're not moving to Greenwich or they're moving out of Greenwich because of the poor state of sports facilities in this town. It's really a shame. Greenwich has got so much to offer, but its sports facilities is really not one of them. I would suggest, if you want to know what's wrong with the Greenwich sports facilities, get in the car, drive to New Canaan, drive to Darien, drive to Ridgefield. Thank you.
Deb McBride. No, we're good. Mark. But not you, Mr. DeCray, sorry. Mark McBride. Is Mark here, Deb? Does he want to speak? No. Now, Mark DeCray. Funny how that worked.
Hello everyone, my name is Mark Ducray, lifelong Greenwich resident. I have 2 sons playing varsity sports this year at the high school. To me this boils down to a really simple issue. Most of us were in favor of the later start time. I personally was, but the later start time is incompatible with fall sports and with the track, as Emily talked about the track team. We can't have our kids practicing in the dark at night. Sports is very beneficial for our kids. They learn a lot. It's a great way to bring the school together. And my sons, I know, learn discipline, and it helps actually with academics, and it's just not fair to our kids. You walk around the fields in our town, as Rob has mentioned, our facilities are disgraced. The fields are horrible. We always tell the story that Dave Rafferty always told was soccer team came to play in Greenwich, and they said, oh, this is going to be fantastic. Greenwich is going to have the best fields ever. They had to cancel the tournament because the coaches said it was unsafe to play on the fields in town. And that's just a disgrace. So the board needs to move ahead. I support, we all don't want to go to court, but we need to just push this through. If we're going to have these later start times, we need to have fields that are lighted. Maybe they're only lighted for 2 hours, that hopefully won't annoy the neighbors, or with the new technology with LED lights. I'm sensitive to that. I live actually next to a church and next to Old Greenwich School, and I can imagine I wouldn't want lights on every night at 11 o'clock, but if you give our kids 2 or 3 hours of time to practice with lights, I don't see why the neighbors couldn't live with that. So I hope you guys move forward with this litigation. Thank you.
Susan Lanning, and then Ann Vranos. Is it Siri or the person? No. Did I say that wrong? Susan Lanning? No. We're good. Okay, Ann Vranos.
Hello, members of the board and members of the community. My name is Ann Vranos, and I'm here to speak on behalf of my student who's a 9th grader at Greenwich High School. I feel a little ill-prepared to speak, and I'm a little shocked that not everyone is speaking tonight. But the one thing that I'm hearing with everyone who's speaking, whether or not they're for or against a litigation, is that these fields need to be lit. It's a safety issue, and it's just a matter of bringing the community together. When we started at Greenwich High School, the one thing everyone said was get your kid involved in something. I have a son who is not a tremendous athlete, and he joined that football team, and it's the best thing he ever did. It gave him a sense of community and a sense of self. And to pick him up now at 4 o'clock because it's getting dark and cutting things short because the coaches are taking into consideration that these kids need to be safe is just kind of ridiculous. We are a town in a wealthy area in Connecticut. It's silly to me that we need to discuss turning lights on. And one last thing that is my understanding, that this is based not upon just a gentleman who's made an argument against it. This is a court judgment. This is a judgment that's been filed in court. So as nice as it would be for public opinion and to get surveys and for the community to come together and think of other things, there's no way around this besides litigating it. And litigation is not fast, so I implore you to act as quickly as you can and start something so that we can overturn this judgment. Thank you.
Tony Natale, and then Susanna Turnbull. Tony Natale? Nope. Okay. Susanna, I hope I'm saying this right. Turnbull? Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Did somebody say something? I missed somebody? No.
I'm Tony Natale. I started this crusade to put lights on Cardinal Stadium in 1996. We finally got them put on in 2003. We did a lot of compromising to have those lights on that field. The height, the number of times they can be put on, for what games, and for how long. Don't compromise. That's all I could say to you. Get these lights done for these kids, let it be safe, and do it in a very speedy and proper way. But don't compromise like we did then. We're sorry for it now. Thank you.
Susanna Turnbull. Is there a Susanna here? Because I know I got that part right. Okay. I think it's Philip John and then Alan Rifkin. No, it can't be John, it's something else. Is there a Philip who wants to speak, address the board? No. Alan Rifkin.
Good evening. Thanks for giving me the time to speak. A lot of people have already covered points that I will not go over again. I think the board is also well aware of the positive link between athletics and academics. I know there are a lot of lifelong residents. I've only been here for 3 years. My son plays varsity soccer. My daughter is on indoor track. I think what this comes down to effectively is trying to balance the interests of the neighbors versus the interests of the students. You all know that. Whatever the best way of trying to achieve that, because obviously the situation has changed. I obviously wasn't here in 2003. I'm not sure what the size of the student body or the participation in the athletic programs or things like that were at that time when the settlement was arrived at. But obviously, hearing everybody speak, at least the number of people who are participating in sports, everything that's happened with the time change and the like, means that, however it is that you need to try to reopen that issue and come to some sort of accommodation. One could say that, basically the number of kids who are negatively impacted by restriction with respect to lights versus, and it's not quite clear to me exactly what the damages are from the perspective of the neighbors who are here, but obviously that is all going to come out in some sort of procedure as opposed to people just saying no. So however you want to get there. But it's also heartening to see the community support all this from the school's perspective. So thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to address the board on this subject? Anyone? Yes. If you could come and just identify yourself and identify yourself so that we can have it on the record, that would be great.
Sure. My name is Ann Kraft. I'm a Greenwich resident and I have a daughter who's an 11th grader at Greenwich High School. So first, just let me say that I know we're here to really talk about lighting the fields, and to me that's a safety issue for our children, and that's a no-brainer. Of course, we should light the fields. But I think there's a bigger issue here, and it's about the change to the school start time. And I think I'd really implore the board to really be open to considering whether this truly is best. I think that this start time is very negatively impacting students and athletes. So as I said, I have a high school junior. Let me tell you a little bit about her day, if you don't mind. She gets up at 6:30 and finishes up whatever homework she was too tired to finish the night before. She goes to school. She is an athlete. After school, she runs cross country and now indoor track. She's one of the lucky ones because her sport is right after school, which is great. So she doesn't have to go home and then come back. But now indoor track is starting and they're running in the dark. So lighting the field is great, but there are 60 girls and 60 boys that are out running in the streets of Greenwich, and we won't be able to have a little light over them as they're all running around. So the safety issue is more than just whether we light a field. By the time she finishes and gets home, it's roughly 5:30, sometimes 6 o'clock. She has a quick shower, dinner, and then it's off to homework. Starting homework at 7 o'clock, and she's lucky because she doesn't have to go out to the swim team or something later. And then she's up till roughly midnight and she is exhausted. And those last few hours are very difficult to do homework. She's frustrated, she's tired, she wants to go to bed, she can't go to bed because she has too much to do. And then it's up again at 6:30 to start it again. I think lighting the field, that's great. That'll help the kids on that field, but that is not enough. I think the change in the start time has just exacerbated a lot of issues, including sports, sleep, their general life. So I implore the board, please consider whether it's truly best. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to address the board?
Hi, my name is Lauren Berger. I have 2 student athletes at Greenwich High School. One is a football player. I was at a JV game where the boys played in the dark, and it was such a safety issue. I saw 2 boys get hurt. They couldn't even find the boys to bring them off the field. Not only that, there were 2 grandparents sitting on the side of the field that couldn't find their cars because it was so dark. They were tripping over the grass, over the rocks. This is a safety issue, and I ask you please address it and address it now. Thank you.
Dawn.
Good evening. Thank you, Board. My name is Dawn Stevens. I have 2 children at Greenwich High School, both played 3 sports there, and I have a graduate who is now a sophomore in high school, also played 3 sports 4 years. I just really wanted to touch base on where I see the facility now. We all know that without the lights and upgrading, it looks circa 2000, 1999. Since then, Greenwich High School, through the board, has changed how we've taught our children. We've done additional AP classes, honors classes, expanded our languages. We've done Innovation Lab. We found Avid. We have sat and done MISA, working on one-to-one. All these great things because these new tools are how we're supposed to be teaching our children now, not the way we taught them in 2000. Our athletes are left behind. Our facilities, everything about it is 2000, 1999. Where has the board been behind our students? We've done all these great things to educate the whole child. We're leaving that part out, and that's really a shame. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wanted to address the board? Mr. Pacino.
Good evening to the board. My name is Mike Pacino. I'm state representative for the 150th District, lifelong resident, town of Greenwich. I'm an alumni of Greenwich High School, student athlete for 3 sports. What's going on today is difficult for everyone, residents, for those parents who have children who are being put in harm's way. We can't dispute that they're not being put in harm's way, as was so eloquently discussed this evening with the track team. The issue is litigation. Litigation is something that we don't want to go down that road. However, because of circumstances and changes that have been made since the time that this litigation was handed down, a decision was handed down by the judge, I think it prudent that we reintroduce this and we look at what has changed since the time that we put forward this litigation was put forward to where we are today with the change in start times and things of that nature. There are a couple of things that we are going to need to do from this moment on, and that's taking a look at all of our inventory right now of where kids can go and practice. We've got too many sports in the fall that need to have that opportunity to extend their practice time, their competition time. As it's been said, we're unable to host particular competitive sporting events because we don't have the fields, we don't have the lighting. So with that being said, I think it's prudent to be looking at lighting field number 7, but I also think that we should be looking at other things outside of the box. We have 3 wonderful middle school facilities with large field areas. We know that we can't light Eastern Middle School, it's in the middle of a residential area. We know that we have some issues, potential issues with Central Middle School, but we do know that we don't have an issue with Western Middle School. And Western Middle School has an opportunity that it can afford a lot of parking for a high school event. It can afford the opportunity for lighting. So that's kind of outside of the scope of what we're talking about, but I think that's something that the board should be looking at, creating an area where we can have an overflow later on down the road, because we're going to need an overflow if we continue down the path that we're on. But as far as it stands right now, these kids and their parents deserve the opportunity to have the fields lit so that they can go on to become the great athletes that they have meant to be. Remember that a lot of these student athletes utilize sports as their opportunity to further their educational experiences. And if we don't give them and afford them that opportunity, we're really doing a grave injustice. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who wants to address the board on the subject? No, with that, I'm going to close the public hearing. Okay. Thank you, Aaron. So now the item is before us. Let me just
read the motion, and then we can move ahead if anybody has motions, amendments, whatever. The motion that's before us is, be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Town of Greenwich hereby authorizes the Town Attorney's Office to initiate litigation to modify the existing 2003 judgment concerning lighting on the Greenwich High School property. Be it further resolved that no litigation can be initiated in this matter unless and until the Board of Selectmen of the town also authorizes same on behalf of the town. Just as a reminder, this motion was prepared by the town attorney, so it is in legal order. Okay. Now, that's the motion. That's, I guess, formally someone needs to put that on the table. Ms. Dayton, Ms. Francis seconds, or Dr. Francis seconds. Discussion. Dr. Francis.
I have a lot of words written here, but let me see if I can organize them a bit. I think, our primary goal as the Board of Education is to look out for the well-being of our students and their safety. It's certainly why I supported the school start time change and why I was committed to address as many of those issues that were impacted by that as possible. I will not deny that there have been repercussions that I wish we could have avoided or would have been taken care of better. I am committed to trying to improve the situation at the high school for our students. I'm also committed to considering and being as good neighbors as we possibly can to those people that are around the high school. This is a community. We want everyone to be as happy as possible. And I think that's very important as well. And I think we want to be respectful and really try to understand as best we can how we can satisfy both needs. My support for litigation is because my understanding is that we have an agreement that the court has kept under their jurisdiction. Going to litigation is not to avoid discussions with neighbors. It's not to avoid the MI process. It's not to avoid P&Z. All of those things still have to happen. But my understanding is that the best approach is to go to the court first and say, this is under your jurisdiction. We would like to address this. May we go forward and do that, and in what ways can we do that? And I would like to do that soon because I'm thinking about next fall. So I think it's really important for us to move this forward. I absolutely am committed to continuing to discuss with neighbors and all members of the community how best to resolve this. But I think it's pretty clear that even minor changes that we think are best for the students and the neighbors, things like modernizing the lighting to what's been recommended to us by the lighting specialists, cannot happen with the agreement that we currently have. And so to make any change in that agreement, we need to go back to court to have that happen. And that's why I'm in support of doing that. Thank you.
Ms. Dayton. Please. Ms. Dayton.
Some matters related to child safety can only be resolved through the legal system, especially when the issues are complex, and especially in this case when the underlying facts are disputed. And for that reason, I strongly believe that we should seek to open this injunction, and we need a firm understanding from the court in order to make both temporary plans as well as long-term plans for our facilities at Greenwich High School and across town. If we do not open the stipulation, we cannot get any sense of forward movement on things like, can we even put up a bubble on fields 6 and 7 to shield the neighbors and have continuous lights for practices? Can we do that? We don't know until we open up the stipulation. Anything in this train of thought requires us to explore it through the court because of many and severe restrictions that have been placed on the use of the property. I also support exploring other fields across town at our middle schools. That's something in our master facility plan. I also support very long-range planning for Cardinal Stadium. That's also in our facility plan. We are moving ahead on parallel tracks to serve the athletic community the best way we can. I want to take care of the neighbors, but the only way we can even have a conversation and discussion about the underlying facts are to go to the court. Thank you.
Mr. Bernstein.
So I just want to make sure we level set expectations. Talking about litigation, that's unlikely to solve any short-term issues, and the sole focus here tonight is on lighting for GHS for the long term. If there were an alternative to litigation to resolve the lighting issues, I would be completely in support of it. However, we've already explored many, and none will fix that long-term challenge presented by the existing agreement. I want to make sure everybody understands, though, that this is a process, a legal process. As with all litigation, this might take a while, possibly a year or more, and ultimately the outcome is uncertain. While we hope for the best results and are asking for something that hopefully will be quite reasonable to ensure health and safety of students, it's up to the judge to make a decision as to the relief. Any changes at GHS involving lights start with the court, and if we are granted relief, only then can we really begin the town process that will involve the selectmen, planning and zoning, the RTM, and the neighbors. Now, my challenge tonight is that I'm uncomfortable that we've not really solidified our specific request for relief, nor have we communicated that to the community. But I do want to assure the neighbors that last night was only the first of what will likely be many opportunities for open discussion. A constructive dialogue is definitely going to help inform our decision-making as we move forward. Our ask will be reasonable, will provide for student health and safety in a way that minimizes the impact on the neighbors. So the motion tonight is just that start of the process, but not an end by any means. As for why we are in this position, I want to reiterate my view that we did not have an adequate implementation plan for the start time changes. Issues about the effects of a later dismissal on our student body were specifically raised by the athletic director and headmaster of the high school to the start time committee. These issues were pushed aside in a rush to get to 8:30, and calls to address this and other issues were ignored. This process certainly should have started much earlier. Changes in administration and staff have only exacerbated implementation challenges. As it stands now, I have complete faith that Dr. Gilday has a firm grasp of the issues and the full support of the board to address them as needed. This is the path forward for the short-term issues, and I am all for exploring additional alternatives for down the road. I also want to make note that there's another public meeting in the building tonight. I don't know if all of you were aware of that. This was scheduled at the same time so that we could move this forward, but in the auditorium is a meeting on the charter change about the makeup of the Board of Education. I would implore you, if you're all interested in town government, as you're all here, thank you, you might want to peek in and take a listen.
Anyone else? Ms. Oaks.
I agree with many of the points that many of the speakers have made tonight, and I think we all have a desired outcome, which is improved facilities at both Greenwich High School. But it's not just a Greenwich High School problem, it's a town problem. We need to start looking and thinking bigger and better across town to provide facilities for our students and our families. And I do agree with one of the speakers who said that it is really an embarrassment when we have visiting teams come to our town and see the types of facilities that we have. And I've been in the car, I've been to New Canaan, I've been to Darien, I've been to Ridgefield. The fact that we don't have bathrooms, lights, handicapped accessible facilities, it's just inexcusable. And it is being addressed as part of a master facility plan. Where I am on this particular issue is, we've had many executive sessions. Last night was the first opportunity we had a chance to meet with the neighbors. And before I had that meeting, I might have been in a different place. But after that meeting, this is where I am. In order to succeed with any legal overturning of that mandated stipulation, it's a legally binding agreement that a predecessor board and a predecessor town government have bound us to. It's not particularly easy to unwind ourselves from that. It's going to be very long and very arduous potentially. We need to have neighbors buy in. And the way to not get neighbors buy in is to sue them. What we need to do is engage with neighbors and have the conversations. By the end of last night, and this was a meeting that was called on Thursday, about 20 people showed up last night, there was people starting to realize this new technology is pretty good. We should look at it. Maybe we should go to the skating club. Oh, if you light 1 or 2 fields just for a couple hours, maybe we could do that, but do they have to be adjacent fields? Could we light maybe 3 and 4 and 7? So there was starting to be an understanding of the issues that we're facing. And I think in order to productively and constructively continue that dialogue, we need to allow those neighbors, those conversations to take place. I don't know where this myth is that the only way to have the conversation is to go to court. That's not true. The first thing the judge will say is, what conversations have you had with the neighbors? And if you can come to the court and say, we've had all these discussions, we may not agree, but here's a general outline of a consensus that we can work, that's how you're going to get to yes, not this adversarial relationship. So I do agree that the only way at some point is to open litigation because it's a court stipulation. I think it's premature to do this tonight. I think we have a lot more legwork to do with the neighbors. I think we need to respect our neighbors. In turn, I think they will be more respectful of us and our needs as a community, as a school, as a town. So I am not in favor of this motion tonight. Depending on how it's dispensed, I would propose that we postpone it to a date certain and direct the administration to do several action steps to have those conversations to get to that ask that we need so everyone has a clear understanding of what it is we're asking for. I see people shaking their heads. I'm not against this at all. But in order to strategically get to where you need to go, you can't use a sledgehammer. You have to use respect. That's where I am.
Ms. O'Neill.
I'm in the same place that Mrs. Erickson is. I'm not against litigation. I just think we need to be thoughtful about it. I'm not even sure we know exactly what it is that we want to ask for. And it is some time off. I do believe that last night, I went into that meeting last night thinking litigation was the answer, and I came out thinking very differently. The people, the neighbors, many of them were willing to listen, and I understand they are not in charge. Mr. Efros is in charge. But if we don't have a relationship with the neighbors that we can use when dealing with Mr. Efros, then we've lost an ally. And I think it's important that we do. This also has ramifications for when we deal with parents that neighbor other fields, that neighbors central. If we don't respect the neighbors from Greenwich High School, no one where we want to go and put lights on a field or build a new field are going to think anything of us. They'll think, well, we're not going to respect them as well. So I would like to see us put this off for a couple of months, give us an opportunity. A couple of months isn't going to make a difference in terms of the outcome.
Please.
It's going to take over a year or more to get the litigation, whatever. And if you don't go in with at least a decent ask, you might lose everything. So I think it's worth the time and the effort to think.
Ms. Applebaum.
Thank you. As a departing member of the board, this will be one of the last actions that I take, and I take it very, very seriously. My son was a student athlete. I completely get the situation and what everyone is going through. As someone that did not vote for the change in start time because I was concerned about not having a plan, I also am concerned about the not having a plan as we might jump into litigation. I do support the need for lights, but I also support very strongly the need for respect and a collegial relationship with our Greenwich High School neighbors. I have a couple questions for Dr. Gilday that I think will help illuminate for everybody, and then I will decide. I had written a statement, and I'll decide whether I'm going to actually read that or just wait for the vote. Dr. Gilday, I think there is confusion both in the community and even, I will say, with myself as a board member. And I will tell you, I have been incredibly conflicted about this because the process itself to me is very confusing. We know that we need to have conversations, and we know we need to identify what it is we can and cannot do. And we've been trying as a board to do that in the proper channels, in executive sessions with various legal counsel. What I'd like to have a better understanding, and I think the community would benefit from, is what is the options? What are the options? Can we do a mediated negotiation with the neighbors without opening the stipulation? Number one.
Yeah, but Debbie, it's a legal question. The answer to the question is, and I think we've been properly advised, is we can talk, and we should talk to, I think, and we have talked to. We've most certainly talked to Mr. Efros. There needs to be a dialogue. I don't hear anybody on the board not suggesting that there needs to be an ongoing dialogue. If that dialogue needs to be mediated, I'm going to talk about that myself, and that's helpful. I haven't heard anybody on the board object to getting outside assistance to do that. As Ms. Dayton said, these things can run in parallel, right? So there's nothing to prevent any of those things that you're necessarily asking about or suggesting. And I think we've been advised that. So, that's absolutely an option.
Okay, next question is, presuming that, is it necessary to actually vote right now to initiate litigation versus the statement that we already made to prepare litigation, to have those conversations and get ourselves to the point of actually filing suit?
I think there are two things to know. One is we're not in this suit alone, right? Or we're not in this agreement alone, right? I was fascinated to meet Tony and Natalia. I'd love to meet someone else who was involved actually in the negotiation of this in the first place. They're scarce as hen's teeth. Yeah, so the thing that I think, we're not in this alone, we're in it with the town of Greenwich. The Board of Selectmen represents the town of Greenwich. So in order to do anything, we need also the consent and involvement of the town of Greenwich. The Board of Selectmen has made exceptionally clear to us that until we take what they believe is firm and affirmative action, they won't consider the question and proceed. So we're in a little bit of a conundrum, and I think they've advised us that, and they've advised us that in writing and then verbally through attorneys. The second thing is that, as you are aware, if we were going to proceed with anything, and I think this is late breaking news, maybe some people who attended could fill us in, we would need probably an additional appropriation from the Board of Estimate and Taxation. The Board of Estimate and Taxation has indicated that they would prefer not to take up that question until they have a clear signal from us what it is we and the Board of Selectmen, what it is they'd intend to do. So we're in an unfortunate situation. I was going to say, well, I'll say something else later about the word litigation and what it really needs to, what it means and what it really needs to mean in this instance. But that, to answer your point of information, that's the answer.
Okay, so then the next question would be, in this case, for the public as well as the sake of the board, if we could define what does litigation mean, because I think that would also be helpful to understand what that is. So you may have had some other comments, but I'm going to ask you to jump ahead to that point so then I can keep going if you don't mind.
I think the formal answer is litigation means what it means as described to us by the attorneys. My own personal view is litigation doesn't, it's going to take a while. So the question probably before the board is, until such time as litigation were ever to begin, which would be a while, what would we do? I would hope that what we would do would be discussion, negotiation, mediation, as much as possible with Mr. Efros, as much as possible with neighbors in our neighborhood. I think we've demonstrated very clearly we're committed to that. That is, as Ms. Erickson said, a very important continuing step. As Ms. O'Neill said, it's an important continuing step. Candidly, personally, I think there's a lot of good news in what it is that we're potentially offering to do. If you've ever stood out and looked at the lights right now, pick your word, they're offensive. They spill onto the neighbor's property. I wouldn't want to live near them. But at the same time, we've all seen
the potential of brand new, very expensive, but I haven't heard anybody on the board ever say they weren't committed to requesting to spend the money to get state-of-the-art technology that would dramatically improve our position as a neighbor in the neighborhood. It's understandable, I think, that the neighbors are skeptical. None of us were on the board when any of this happened. I don't know if any of us actually had kids in schools when this thing happened. Maybe some did, but most of us didn't. I think we've heard from neighbors what a horrendous experience it was when they went through this the first time. I think we're all very attuned to that. Litigation is an authorization, I think in this case, necessary authorization of the charter to start. It doesn't necessarily mean haul off and go sue somebody starting tomorrow. Well,
I'm happy to provide a definition of litigation.
Yeah,
Basically, it's a case brought in a court by the parties involved. So it is about filing, right? We file a complaint. In this case, it won't be a complaint. We're filing a motion to reopen the order.
Right.
There's a process. We'll be meeting with the judge. They'll be scheduling certain checkpoints during the proceeding. They may ask you to go to mediation. You could actually refer you to another judge or a private mediator. All of these things are possibilities, but until you file with the court, that process doesn't start. That's litigation.
right. At the same time, Peter, I think you'd agree that in the context of the town charter and signaling to the BET and the Board of Selectmen, we're not alone in this. It has to initiate a process, however long it takes them to do that, initiate that process, so that you could get to an actual filing and a filing in the court. I think we all understand that that's not going to happen tomorrow morning. Is that true?
Well, actually, I think the motion that we've already taken up gives them all the power they need to actually do that process and get to the point where they've got a filing and they're ready to go. So I think that the change in the motion, the motion before us right now, all it does is says they're authorized once they're ready to go do that. That's the only difference. Right now, they should have already been working and preparing for the day we did this.
We've sent that forward to those two boards. They've signaled that back to us. We can choose to take that under advisement and argue with them, or we can recognize what they've told us.
I have more, but Ms. O'Neill has a question. I'd like to let her go in.
I thought it would be helpful if we got a summary either from Dr. Gilday or Dr. Francis about what was just said at the BET meeting when we were asking funding for litigation.
I don't think you all want to hear from the superintendent, to be honest. Superintendent says, neighbors, I care about you. It's not that I don't care about you, but superintendent says, whatever you do, you make the decisions to keep the kids safe. And that has to be the ultimate priority for this board and for everything that we do. And I can't believe I'm in Greenwich, Connecticut having to say that and to talk about infrastructure and everything else we've been talking about. But it's not that we don't care about neighbors, so I don't want neighbors to think that. What we've learned is that we're in a, I like to call it, well, number one, I like to say in life, things are simple if you don't make them complicated. And we're in a situation right now where it becomes complicated, but it's becoming kind of a hamster wheel. So everybody is waiting for the next party to make the first step. So that's what we kind of learned tonight. So it's back to the Board of Ed to decide to make the step or not make the step. To me, I don't understand why there's a moment's hesitation to say we need to make the decisions to move forward to keep our children safe so that they can have great playing seasons. They've been amazing. They are amazing athletes and amazing students. You have incredible educators, you have incredible caring administrators, and you're a community that should be driven by your success. So I think we have to stop tripping all of this up and get ourselves together collaboratively to solve these issues as a town. I think it's a town issue as much as a school issue. I think start time might have made this more visible, but I think we needed it anyway, because you need safety paths to get to the high school field, even in its current condition. We have some basic things we have to do that we currently cannot do until we go in front of a judge to ask for permission to do that. So I'm not understanding the hesitation.
Ms. Apple. I'm sorry, hold on just one second. Lauren, I'm forgetting about you because you're living in this little box.
But there's a follow-up.
Did you want to speak?
Sure, I'll try to be brief. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
So I totally agree. We have to start. I appreciate where we need to be from a position of working with the neighbors, but we have to start. And part of the strategy, legal strategy, would be to go in with neighbor support, and I think that we could do that in parallel. But I'm very prepared to vote and start this now.
Ms. O'Neill.
I appreciate Dr. Gilday sharing her comments, but that wasn't exactly a summary of the BET meeting. So maybe Dr. Francis wants to do that.
The summary of the BET meeting, I felt, was more of, it was that it's back to the board to make the decision. That was the message or the takeaway that I had from our meeting.
Right, but didn't they also say that we need to take a bigger look at the whole situation and decide what our priorities are, and then to think about another place where this stadium might be? I mean, they were not, in my estimation, well, they didn't support the ask for the funds. It just seemed, I got the message that they didn't think we quite had our priorities in right order. It was.
Mrs. O'Neill, you know this about me already. You know I don't mince words too often. My priority are the 9,002 kids. That's my priority.
I agree.
Ms. Applebaum.
Back to me. So my next question would be, what would be the timeline and what would be the action steps, presuming we vote tonight to initiate litigation? And when and how would the conversations with the neighbors be included in that process? Because that truly is one of my great concerns. I believe this is a community-wide issue. I believe that it is incumbent on us to continue to be a good neighbor and respectful of the people who live there, and that any efforts throughout town to address much-needed athletic facilities elsewhere in town will not be as successful if we do not approach this in the right way. So I want to be cautious and careful while addressing the needs that we have.
So what I do know, I do have a thank you letter for neighbors. Thank you for coming yesterday. And obviously we will have planned meetings going forward so that you have more than 4 days notice. So we will make sure that we have that ongoing dialogue. I do know that we will take action. At that point, this would be referred to the Board of Selectmen for their agenda, which is November 30th, their next meeting date. They would, what? They may take it up, they may not. At that point, it goes back to town attorney to continue moving forward with that part of the path, but that does not impede our opportunity to continue talking with neighbors and continue to work towards the fine-tuning of the ask that we have, which also includes things like the height of the light poles and all those kinds of things that will become part of that request.
Some, I guess a question more to the board chair. Is there a process that can be put in place that would ensure a time frame for conversations with the neighbors so it wasn't left open-ended as to how and when those will happen, and sooner versus later?
I wish I had Dr. Francis. My assumption is she's dealing with a medical issue with one of her patients, which is probably more important than anything we're going to talk about. But
Dr. Francis has been kind enough to lead the engagement as chair of the Start Time Committee with the neighbors, and I know that she has an ongoing plan to do that. Okay, could you provide an update for us on what the plan is for further engagement with the neighbors? I know yesterday was the first, well, it wasn't the first step, but it was an important step, and I know we have plans for more.
Dr. Dillon and I were talking about this today. I'm not sure exactly where we are, but sending out an email to the neighbors, setting up a second date for a meeting. We were somewhat struggling with whether we have to give 30 days notice or whether we can have a meeting sooner than that, given that this is not really a legal step, but really more of a discussion. But we are certainly in the planning steps to set up the next meeting and to continue those as needed.
Could I just ask for some clarification? What will we be trying to accomplish with this next meeting? Oh, it's a repeat of what we had last night? And will we already have had a lawyer, so we're all lawyered up, and then they're going to say, well, we're not going to say anything because we got our lawyer. So I just don't understand. Let me answer the first question then. What is it that we want to accomplish, and is it going to be a repeat of what was happening last night?
I think, as was mentioned, we felt like towards the end of the meeting, there were some discussions about preferences, other options. We had certainly started with a presentation in terms of getting some information out, and I think sort of an ongoing discussion about what the concerns are and are there alternatives to things that we had considered that might satisfy both sides.
But that's my point when I said before, why don't we postpone this for a month or two so that we can have this dialogue and then move on?
Please. Ms. Applebaum. We're in the middle of your questions. So do you have more questions, or did you want to move on to a statement? I'm just trying to... Okay. Ms. Erickson.
I just want to make a couple points. I don't want to disabuse anyone who might be thinking that I don't care about the safety and well-being of our students. That's absolutely not the case. What I am thinking about is the best way to accomplish the end game, which is what we're all looking for. What I heard last night was that a motion to sue the day after the first neighborhood meeting, after 4 days' notice, will be viewed as a hostile and aggressive act. To me, that's not a good starting point for starting out with negotiations in good faith. This is what I think needs to happen. Again, the safety and well-being of students is paramount to me. I did not vote in favor of this change in school start time, but as with all board votes, I got on board once the board did make that vote. However, let's all be clear, lighting is not the answer to every problem that we're facing. We have kids missing too much class time because they have to get on the bus to get to their away games. We have kids missing class time because they need to prep and get down to the field on their home field. There are a host of other issues that need to be addressed. And at the moment, the administration is gathering data. There's a lot to sift through. But this is just one small piece of the puzzle. And I don't want people to get too focused on this because there's a whole bunch of other things that need to work out to make this work. So again, I have the same goal. I have a difference in strategy. If the majority of the board feels that the neighbors will be amenable to speaking with us in a constructive way after they've been sued, then I hope that works. I just don't happen to think that's the right strategy.
Please. Sir. Sir. Please, we need to move on. We need to move through this so we can get our work done. I'm gonna jump ahead, Debbie, and I'm just gonna share my view on this thing. There's plenty of coulda, woulda, shoulda. Okay, we are where we are. This is my problem with this. Okay, to your point, there are many challenges we have. Okay, we can't keep looking at the elephant. You know how you eat that elephant? One bite at a time. We have a problem and we need to solve it. We need a solution to support student athletes. One solution, one potential solution, is lighting in a reasonable and friendly way for our neighbors, practice fields at GHS. There are others. Creating world-class training facilities at middle schools, bubbling at GHS, building new facilities at Eastern, supporting the building of new facilities at Eastern Civic Center, Havermeyer Field, or another Parks and Rec location that is not under the control of the Board of Education. Meanwhile, we have competing claims relating to the property, okay? The town of Greenwich says one thing, says the only thing that matters is the one agreement that we have. We have Mr. Efros telling us there are 5 agreements that the Board of Education needs to comply with. Meanwhile, neighbors have told us yet something else. They refer to things called ironclad agreements, other agreements going all the way back to the 1960s when this building was planned. Candidly, as a board member, I don't know how to figure out which way is up. We've been talking about this for more than a year. We've been looking at legal documents for more than a year. Eventually, we have to resolve all of those claims. And we need to get to the bottom of what we can and can't do at the GHS property. If we're just going to talk about lights, next week it's going to be something else relating to Cardinal Stadium. The week after that, it's going to be something relating to 6 and 7. The week after that, it's going to be something relating to the parking lot. This has illuminated a big problem in the Board of Education. We don't really know what we can and can't do at this property. This is a way to get to the bottom of that. If the neighbors are right, and we are completely restricted because our predecessors made 5 agreements, so be it. And you know what? All of the athletic parents and all the other over 3,000 parents need to know that answer. This, to your point, is going around and around in a hamster wheel that we just never get off. The ask is reasonable in my book. We're not asking to go turn this into Yankee Stadium 24/7. The ask is prescribed. It's essentially saying we need a little bit more time to light our fields, to be able to have practice. It's prescribed at certain times of the year, not forever, and it's for certain hours of the day. Now, I agree. We have not had the level of dialogue with neighbors so that they understand what it is that we would even be requesting. That absolutely needs to happen. I don't like the sound of the word litigation either. I preferred the word negotiation. Unfortunately, we are not in this alone. We need the Board of Selectmen and we need the Board of Estimate and Taxation. We most certainly need the Board of Selectmen because any dialogue that we're going to have with neighbors and any dialogue we're going to have with Mr. Efros, unless we can provide an assurance that the Board of Selectmen are on board with the Board of Education, I would never negotiate with one party in an agreement if I didn't know the other party was on board. The neighbors absolutely need to know who it is they're talking to in any discussion they're going to have with us, and they need to be able to trust that they have everybody in the town on board. The only way to do that is, unfortunately, in this way with our town charter, you have to go this way of authorizing litigation. The Board of Selectmen need to do it. That's the only way to have a real process of resolving the claims. It's the only way to properly talk to the neighbors so that they have assurances that if they're talking to us, we're authorized to talk. Therefore, for me, authorizing litigation doesn't mean hauling off and suing everybody tomorrow. I realize, as Mr. Bernstein has pointed out, as a technical matter, that's probably what it is. I know, to your point on the process, Ms. Applebaum, we've talked about the schedule. We've had these conversations. We all know that there's nobody sitting over at Town Hall ready to file papers tomorrow morning. I'd like to see a proactive and mediated comprehensive agreement that removes confusion and is a negotiated settlement that encompasses all of these things and removes all of the uncertainty that exists by all of these competing claims. I think we also, I have confidence that through a dialogue, maybe it's mediated, as Ms. O'Neill suggested the other day, with an outside mediator, that we do that collaboratively and cooperatively. I'm confident, maybe foolishly so, that we can solve the needs of the non-student athletes We can solve the needs of the student athletes, and we can be good neighbors to the people who in the neighborhood in which we are also a neighbor. Call it foolish optimism, but we need to get the process started so that can occur. To everyone's point, my last point is, I agree 100%. This is a long, conversations about GHS are a long, protracted path. It needs to start. I would like to see the board separately at the appropriate time also look for Plan B, because we need a Plan B for student athletes by September 1, 2018. And if we don't get at that problem as well, in addition to letting this run, we're not going to get there, and we're going to wind up disappointing students again, and then it's a real big issue. We need to get at this. We need to stop talking about it. It's time to take some action and make some things happen. Ms. Applebaum.
Thank you for that, and thank you for sharing your thoughts, because I know usually the chair goes last, and I appreciate the ability to be the final word on this. Because I've shared some of what's already shared some of what's in the statement, and because of things that have been said by other people, I'm not going to take the time to read the whole thing. My big concern here is that we are moving forward in a collaborative and respectful manner. It is this conundrum of the chicken and the egg that has been bothering me. The thought to initiate litigation when you really haven't heard from all the parties involved is concerning to me. And it makes me hesitant to support that and to not, like Ms. Erickson and Ms. O'Neill, ask for a brief, very defined postponement so that those parties can feel that they've been heard. Conversely, I know that there is a time frame that we're working under, which is restrictive, and that the process needs to get started, and I agree about the hamster wheel. I've been in those meetings where it feels like Groundhog Day. So I hear all the sides, and it is challenging. If I can have agreement and a true understanding that the neighbors will be an integral part of this process, and that we are all working together from the outset, if the only way to move forward is to initiate litigation, despite my discomfort as well with that term, I would prefer that this be a negotiation, that this be a discussion, and that everybody is working together as a community to solve the issues that we have. We do have real issues. We do have teams who cannot practice. There are legitimate concerns and reasonable solutions, and I heard from neighbors last night that they're willing to talk about reasonable solutions. So my big issue is the timing. How do we make sure that everybody is on the same page at the same time, while we also address what is needed by the Board of Selectmen and others, that we're not on the hamster wheel?
It's a challenge. Okay, any more on this?
Call the question.
Call the question. Are there any other subsidiary motions? No. Lauren, did you have any other? Yeah, thank you. Did you have any other comment, Lauren?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. With that, I'm going to call the question. Let me reread the motion. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Town of Greenwich hereby authorizes the town attorney to initiate litigation to modify the existing agreement concerning lighting of Greenwich High School property. Be it resolved further that no litigation can be initiated in this matter unless and until the Board of Selectmen of the town also authorize the same on behalf of the town. Any other questions on that? Okay. All those in favor of accepting this motion?
Aye.
All those against? All those abstaining? Debbie, I'm sorry, I didn't know where you... Yes. You voted yes, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4. That's, no, that's 6, right? 6 to 0. That motion is passed. Is there any other business before the board?
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, Mr. Bernstein?
Second. All those in favor of adjourning? Okay, 7-0.